We are talking about femininity and the activation of Shakti on the Tantric path with Tantra teachers Magdalena and Mojdeh Moasser. Learning what it is to be a woman is, of course, a huge question and a lifelong journey, but maybe one that we can forget to go on consciously. Magdalena and Mojdeh, why would you say it's a necessity for a woman to awaken her femininity?
During this very important journey that we call life, at a certain moment we become aware of the necessity to awaken. And it is something that happens to all of us, that we need to take the spiritual journey, shall we say, to awaken, to grow, to expand our consciousness, to understand more about ourselves, understand more about the universe, understand more about God. Now, as Tantrics, we say that we should start from where we are, to be very honest with ourselves and to take exactly the perspective of where we are in this moment. And from this angle, one of the easiest angles to start this journey on is the one thing that most of us know to be true, and that is that we are a woman or we are a man. And from there, well, it's somehow this whole journey kind of unfolds. Once we acknowledge that, and we acknowledge the growth that can come from this understanding, the journey simply just unfolds itself. Now, it is our birthright, I believe, as women, to awaken spiritually. And also, it's pretty hard. If you're just focusing on becoming more spiritual, it's not that possible to not awaken your femininity at the same time. It's a natural blossoming that takes place. And similarly, if you decide profoundly to take this journey of awakening your femininity, naturally your spirituality blossoms as well. So they go hand in hand, because actually the journey of life is, or life taken consciously, is a journey of becoming more and more authentic, more and more real. And so it makes sense that everything that is real and authentic to us starts to grow and awaken and blossom. And femininity is very much part of that. I would say the essence of it, actually.
Yeah, I can relate to that very much, because I got to a point in my life where I felt like I had everything that I was aspiring to have. I had the job that I would always have wanted, the house that I would have always liked, and the relationship that I would always have liked. But somehow I had this emptiness inside of me, and I really couldn't figure out what's missing. And it was kind of baffling to me as to why I was still unfulfilled, even if seemingly I was very successful and very in tune with all the things that I'd been aspiring to have. And in discussing with my yoga teacher, I raised the point with him, and he pointed out that there's, as Magdalena said, there's only one thing in life I can be certain of, and that is that I am a woman. And everything else is somehow a variable. My profession is a variable, my relationship is a variable, where I live is a variable. But this one thing I can be certain of and perfect is that I am a woman. And he made the suggestion that I actually go on this journey of awakening my state of femininity as a way of discovering what is actually the missing things there.
Was that a shock to you?
Yeah, it was very baffling to me, because I never really, before that, I hadn't considered my femininity as the only thing I can be certain of. But then when I went away and kind of contemplated it felt true that it is in fact the one thing I can rely on is the fact that I am a woman, and so it made sense to work on becoming the best woman that I can be, because that's the only thing I can kind of anchor myself into.
How did that particular aspect of your journey, Magdalena, start?
Honestly, I've always been interested in femininity and being a woman. Yes, I did have times in my teenager years and like early 20s where I was a bit more tomboyish somehow, but always I never felt that I could say that I could live that fully, really, truly, you know? So being a awakening femininity was somehow resonating with me from quite a young age. I mean, I started to want to learn belly dance, for example, from a young age, because I recognized that it was very much connected with femininity. I also approached the tantric path because I was becoming aware that I wanted to go deeper in my sacredness, and take this sacred approach to eros and femininity even deeper. And also, I think also because my astrological configuration is very feminine. I have a lot of planets in Cancer and things, which is a very feminine sign. It's very close to me somehow. I feel that being a woman is just me, or being feminine is just me. So I can say that when I started to approach it more consciously, I felt like I was at the university of becoming a goddess. And literally, I felt like that. There were some moments that it was so clearly perceptible for me that it was like a university of becoming a godly woman, you know. But before that, I was literally just feeling it from the interactions I had with people, and people would come to me, and this was would mention that they felt that I had some very special qualities, and I became more and more aware through this kind of feedback, also energetic feedback, being aware of how polarized I was by very masculine presences, for example, or consciousness that was prevalent. It made me even more aware of my own femininity there.
So what are the different aspects of Shakti that are available to all women to explore?
I mean, Shakti is vast, complex, all-encompassing, and in this respect, inside of us exists this vastness full of all the potentialities and everything there that exists. And I hope I don't sound too grandiose when I say this, because it is a reality that we are blessed with having so much inside of us, and yet we also have a kind of ignorance to what we have inside. We have many, many, many qualities, but very many of those qualities are just sleeping. And very many are also actively awakened, and we can awaken them more and more, and there are many nuances. For example, sensuality. In our modern times, we have another picture of what sensuality is, and we view it as somehow, in some cases, wrong, in other cases that it's something kind of basic and like a very raw type of energy that we have. Or anyway, no, I mean, there is so many nuances to this, and yet it is so much part of us to discover and to awaken this erotic side of us and live this state of eros deeply in us. Also, to understand the importance of vitality, because it's also something that's very misunderstood, and something on my personal journey I recognize very much the importance of, and put a huge emphasis on it in my practice, shall we say, or in journey of awakening. Also to awaken the wisdom, and that is part of a spiritual journey. It's hard not to, if you're on a spiritual journey, not to become more wise if you take it consciously. And also the courage, discipline, all of these things. There's so many things. The humor, wow. I mean, I could list you a whole list of qualities, and I'm sure that it's not necessary, because I think many of us are aware. Maybe Mojdeh would like to say some personal ones.
Well, as you say, it's an infinite amount of energies that can be manifested through Shakti. So it's very difficult to kind of actually categorize it. For me, what's really helped is actually the study of the archetypes of the soul, because this really helps me to kind of tune into very unique nuances that can be defined more clearly, and I can then relate to it more directly and actually understand it by relating to how different women kind of manifest different archetypes. And here in this school, I found this ongoing study of the archetypes very, very useful. First with the predominant 4 archetypes that we have, and then the sub-archetypes that also exist that deepen the understanding even more, has helped me to understand what qualities are unique to my soul and what qualities I need to work on more to awaken my soul, and to appreciate the qualities in other women and understand that they're just coming from that specific type of archetype, and that's why they have very specific ways of being a woman. So it gave this kind of admiration and this kind of perspective on the vastness of qualities that can actually appear through a woman.
So you found like a structure through which to manifest Shakti? Because as you say, it's vast.
Yeah, it's a frame, and I've even worked on it in this way where there's been periods in my life, for example, where I've needed to assimilate more the qualities of the mother archetype, for example, and just by studying it and being more conscious about it, then I've started to kind of understand the mother archetype much better, or even speaking more with friends who are mothers, because I haven't had any children myself, so I have kind of these qualities, but they're not as awakened in me as a friend, a close friend who has had a child, or other archetypes that aren't necessarily obvious. And what was surprising for me is that actually, even though I thought I was predominantly one archetype, I realized after my studies that I'm actually a very different archetype in myself, and I've conditioned myself to believe I'm one thing and actually in fact something else.
So let's talk now about these various tantric tools for awakening Shakti. Magdalena, what are the various tools available?
I mean, I think we're very blessed on the tantric path because we are endowed with very many tools to use. I think the first blessing that I received on this tantric journey is the gift of the yoga practice, and developing the discipline to practice daily and meditate also, and to see that each time I get on the yoga mat, it's moments of spiritual awakening that can last forever. And this is interesting because many people assume that awakening femininity is just about learning to put your makeup on or do your hair or be this perfect body or something like this. But actually, I would say that the thing that helped me the most was having a good spiritual practice and to take this practice consciously. So that's the first one I would say is the yoga practice there. And then secondly, we are really also blessed with things like learning about the importance of transfiguration. A very important attitude on the tantric path to see beyond the form. Actually, transfigurare in Latin means beyond form. So this is to see through the eyes of the heart, looking at everything through these eyes of wisdom that come from our heartful gaze. And this is when actually we start to perceive life not just as something that we have to do, but as a beautiful paradise that we can live in. It's kind of hard not to see yourself on a beautiful journey of awakening if you have this transfiguration inside of you awakened. And there are many practices that involve the transfiguration, many practices that we do in the Shakti groups, for example, involving us admiring and transfiguring the other women, seeing them for their greatest potential that they are. So, and again, another very beautiful and useful practice. And I would say one very humbling and also important practice is the appreciation of what means nourishment, and that is not just nourishment on eating, which is very important to learn how to eat very healthy and to know how to eat and what to eat that suits you and your structure, but also how to nourish yourself in the elements, because we are nature, just as important as nature is nature herself. And by having this very profound appreciation of nature and all that she gives us and offers us, we can learn to nourish ourselves very easily with her vital energies. And from this perspective, I would say that this tantric knowledge of the elements and their importance also led me more deeply into this aspect.
Could you give an example of that? Are you talking about swimming in lakes and walking in woods? And
these are all practices that I do, and to go, I'm very much love to be in water, so any experience that I have where I'm swimming and I'm actually in this element is making me very fulfilled. But also I love being in nature, in the forest, in the woodlands, but also in the sunshine and just close to the earth in all the ways possible. So, yeah.
And doing that consciously.
Doing it consciously and becoming aware of the rejuvenating effects. Also, I just want to add that there are many, the archetypes is what Mojdeh mentioned, is also a very important spiritual practice, but to be aware of that there are many branches of learning more about yourself that we have that help to awaken the soul. And for example, the archetypes, or learning about your zodiac sign, or learning about your Enneagram type, all of those things are helping you very much to awaken your soul and also thus awaken the femininity that we have. So again, it's endless. There are many different things, but yeah.
Mojdeh.
So actually this aspect of nourishment that you speak about, I now realize, listening to that, it really was a big part of my connection with my femininity, because of this process of tuning into what my needs are, and also doing the yoga practice and feeling the energies a lot more within myself and interiorizing a lot more, and carrying out all the purification techniques that we do really helped me to tune in a lot more into what my needs are for nourishment, and when do I need to be eating, what do I need to be eating, from simple things like that to where do I need to go in terms of what type of nature do I need, and what are the best conditions for my growth. And it really kind of stimulated this continuous awareness of my personal needs on many different levels, to be able to actually understand myself better and what I need to offer myself to be able to go on this journey of growth.
How were you before you started to explore your femininity?
I was a student when I started, so I was an architecture student, and I was partying very hard and eating not very well. I was not a vegetarian. I was not really exercising. I didn't really know what I needed, and I could even notice from that young age, at the age of 23, that my body is already starting to struggle because of the kind of the turmoil I was putting it through, not really knowing. And I was smoking, I was drinking alcohol quite a lot. So I wasn't really treating my body very respectfully, I have to say.
But that was considered normal.
Yeah. I was absolutely one of the normal kids in the class, basically, and just following the sort of conventional lifestyle that was there. And just by starting to practice yoga, I wasn't in any of the Shakti groups at the time, but by just starting to practice yoga, it just, all of that naturally faded away. So by tuning into the energies, I slowly just naturally started to notice that when I eat meat, for example, it just didn't feel right anymore, or my body couldn't digest it properly, or I was getting constipated, or, there were many symptoms that were showing me that it wasn't the right diet for me. And the rest of it, like when I drank alcohol, it just felt really strange to be out of control like that. And smoking just completely felt wrong fairly quickly after.
So growing up, what kind of messages did you have about being a woman?
In some ways, I was very lucky to grow up in a big family of women, with predominantly women. And for example, I have 7 aunties, and they mostly have daughters, and I'm one of 3 sisters. So I've been surrounded by a lot of women, and I've also grown up in an Iranian family where femininity is an important part of the culture. There isn't an attempt to sort of like dumb down femininity. We're a very polarized culture generally. So I was always actively encouraged to be more feminine, to kind of be in touch with my body, to kind of behave in a certain way that is considered to be culturally more feminine. But at the same time, there are some sort of like cultural suppressions, particularly related to kind of expressions of sensuality and levels of openness and expressiveness that I also kind of took on as a little burden there. So I had both aspects, and I rebelled against it a little bit, particularly this kind of continuous impulse from my mom to kind of wear pretty dresses or put more makeup on. And for a while I rebelled it, and because I was also in a very male-dominated environment all the time. I was always attracted to kind of subjects or professions that were more male-dominated, and I noticed that when I do these things, it attracts more attention than I wanted. And I kind of wanted to be more on a equal level to the guys rather than attracting this sort of like frilly girly attention. So I dumbed it down, and I became quite your conventional archetype image of wearing all black and hiding the curves and not showing my breasts, to the point where up until the age of 17, 18, I didn't even really know I had breasts. And it took a friend who pointed out that I've actually got quite big breasts. And so it was a very gradual transition. I wasn't like Magdalena. I was always in touch with her femininity, but
so you're saying that you needed to strip away certain things that were there, that were false, that weren't really you. That part of awakening Shakti is stripping away.
Yeah, and it didn't come as a very kind of invasive stripping away. Nobody forced any layers off me. It was more a very gradual transition of, as I became more and more aware of myself, my needs, then layers just kind of drifted off. And then I started to just connect more and more with my own needs and my own true confidence and my own true sensuality, so that I can be the woman that is actually true to herself.
Magdalena, how does your connection with Shakti lead to liberation, or how has it? Some examples from your own life, if you'd like to share some.
So as this awakening of Shakti has started within me, I discover also that my connection also with Shiva, and the consciousness also awakens more and more. And this also increases my aspiration to know Shiva, to know God more and more and more. Also, as I awaken, or as I've been awakening, I notice also that this part of being a living goddess starts to become something very natural in life. And again, I don't want to say it like very grandiose. It's kind of just very natural, and makes sense that there is a certain magic and a certain grace that I feel comes when you start to awaken this Shakti state more and more. And in those moments where you feel this state of being a godly woman, or you feel that something true is awakening inside of you, you start to really become aware of your authenticity and how real you are. And it's a very beautiful feeling, because in that authenticity, then you realize, you feel this godly side of you, and you feel this pure essence of God there. Now, I would say that this awakening of the authenticity is an extremely important part of the journey towards becoming liberated. And of course, I'm not liberated, so I can't say that I know the anywhere near that end result yet. But I can say that yes, that the path of awakening Shakti is fundamental, actually, to first awakening the soul, and then ultimately this state of self-realization, and then liberation.
So awakening Shakti is a fast track to spiritual evolution.
Yes, it is a fast track, but it's also just a necessity. I mean, it's hard to avoid it. If you're really aspiring to evolve, your femininity will naturally awaken. And it awakens not to what other people think that how you should be. It's that natural blossoming that takes place inside of you, according to your nature. And it is like a flower that starts to blossom. But not all flowers are identical. We're all in this amazing forest and pastures of so many different types of flowers, and that's the beauty of it. Is this it's like this complete harmony of the universe starts to become apparent when we awaken the state of Shakti, and also through this awakening start to also perceive this awakening in the others as well.
Mojdeh.
It really helped in the process of me becoming softer, because I really hardened up through being in a very, I guess, male-dominated environments, and childhood, growing up, all sorts of things. I developed quite rigid shells around me, and by working on this awakening of femininity, really helped me to actually soften up quite a lot, and to kind of allow myself to be delicate and vulnerable if I needed, sensitive, and these qualities have been very important for my particular path. And maybe there are qualities that are, innate and natural to others, but for me this was a big part of it, because until I softened down and gave myself the space to actually just be, and more accepting of myself and more others, then I couldn't fully open up to even start to aspire towards this state of liberation.
How did you then bring in polarity as an accelerator?
So polarity for me, just this energy of the relationship, and this energy of the beginning of a relationship, and giving these parameters of it being a spiritual relationship, it kind of kindled this aspiration in me to be very creative. And it came quite naturally through an opening of my heart towards this person, this man. It naturally created like a huge flow of creativity. And this was the main thing, and creative ways of like bringing joy, bringing happiness, creative ways towards sensuality, creative ways of writing poems, songs, arranging the room, all sorts of ways. It just kind of, and this game of polarity that kind of awakened this creativity also just helped me to connect with my feminine expression very clearly in a very tangible way, because my creative expression had always before that been quite very serious about architecture and buildings and big things like that, and I hadn't really kind of played with this side of creativity before, where I could just do it for the joy of pleasure, or for the joy of beauty, or for the joy of just being myself. And the game of Polarity really awakened this in me.
Can you give some specific examples?
Yeah, I think it's been like in more recent years, tuning into what the relationship needs and learning all the tools that we learn in the Shakti groups. So, for example, if I feel there's a purification needed in my lover, then spontaneously, like a beautiful purification ceremony would download within me, or wonderful if I feel like there needs to be some more inspiration towards eros, then a wonderful dance would be inspired within me, or a massage, or very different tools that just kind of come a little bit like how you might pick a dish from a cookery book, because we have all these amazing sets of tools there, and then they kind of, having practiced them in the Shakti groups or having heard about them, then when the moment arises where you really need to kind of bring them to the surface, they kind of just come naturally through the grace of the heart being open, and they come as gifts for the relationship or for the lover.
Sounds very creative. Magdalena, can you add anything to that?
I would say that awakening the femininity and the Shakti state, I, through this also immense polarization that takes place, discovered that I love God more and more. And the more that this process takes place, the more closer I feel to God.
If a woman feels that a man loves her, very often she'll feel she has to love him back and may not actually think about what she deeply wants or what is appropriate for her on the spiritual path. What would you say to that? How can the awakening of Shakti help that?
I guess one of the parts of awakening Shakti is actually awakening the power of discernment, and to be also lucid is a part of being a Shakti, even though it's not always associated in that way. And it comes actually through this process of understanding yourself better. Like I said before, it's through the purifications, through the hatha yoga, or through the nutritional understanding, through the understanding of the cycles of the month, you start to become very good at discerning what is the right thing for you. And when the situations arise, when, like you say, where there's a attraction or there is a polarity there, then there is a point where you've practiced this application of discernment to such an extent in yourself that you start to also see where that attraction is coming from, where the desire is coming from. And is it a kind of a desire that is coming from the heart, or is it a desire that is coming from a more instinctive place? And when there's a situation where the love is not totally mutual, there's still the temptation to go into that relationship anyway, because there is some validation, and that validation can be very, very kind of arousing and very attractive, because it's kind of giving you a purpose in a way. And so it's actually quite a difficult game with the ego to see that and to make a decision which direction you want to go with it. And it's an ongoing process of observation and an ongoing process of actually tuning into the heart to know if it's truly what you need in this moment or not.
And it may be through conditioning that women become habituated to stepping into roles or to put on masks in order to be accepted or to be successful. Is this part of the transformation that can take place when you're awakening Shakti? Can you start to take off the masks, take off the roles that you have found yourself in through your upbringing or expectations of society?
Yeah, for sure, because definitely was the case for me that there were many different masks that I was wearing, whether it was for the family or for professionally or for relationships, and they were mostly associated to culture, like expectations or needing to validate myself to fulfill a certain role there. And through the practices that have taken place, it just started to kind of shield off those masks and get to a more kind of true state of self-confidence, because of this connection with what the essence of the soul is, and removing a little bit more and more from this social conditioning and what the validation schemes are.
Yes. One thing when I was doing my research that kept coming up was the thing about being competitive. Women being raised to be competitive.
I think that it's one of the beautiful things that we encourage in here in the school, but also in many of the traditional cultural societies, is this aspect of sisterhood, and somehow by it replaces. The appreciation of other women starts to replace this attitude of competition. Competition exists because we feel like we need to make our way in the world to be seen. You know, in a man's world, we have to develop certain qualities we believe in order that we can live up to the challenge of life somehow. However, I think this is one of the biggest misunderstandings we have today, because actually the process of being a woman is also about process. It's not a process. This aspect of being a woman is also about bigging up the other women, seeing their true nature, seeing what they are and their value. And actually, this is one of the beautiful things about sisterhood, is that we together grow, yeah, and we stop to look at faults or criticize, but actually start to really appreciate and admire what everybody has, and this allows this flourishing in our hearts of everything that the others have inside of us deeply.
And it's a way to develop as well, to take on the nuances of other women.
Yes, I mean, and naturally when any group of women comes together, we are, throughout society, I mean, Mojdeh will tell you from the Iranian culture. Also, I think you did a beautiful project on femininity in different cultural societies, but it is such that, we laugh together, we dance together, we chat, we talk, we share our experiences, all of those things, which help us to grow, because we learn so much from each other and from these very valuable experiences.
I would just add that this competitiveness between women has really come across through this sort of like masculinization of femininity, and it's clear that when women come together and start to admire one another and open up to actually see the woman for all her beauty, rather than instantly being intimidated by another woman's beauty, then she does very slowly also start to assimilate the beauty of that woman and to relate to it and resonate with it, so it becomes also a part of her. And in this way we grow a lot more efficiently and rapidly.
And is it also true that when you're coming together, groups of women are more likely to be creative? There's more likely to be some magic in the air or some poetry in the air?
Yes, I would say so. And it, like, for me, it became very, very evident in the Tantra for Women teacher training courses, where there is a lot of creative activity going on there. And you see that like when a group of women come together and put their hearts and their minds together for a common purpose, then the outcome is actually exponentially much bigger and much better than if we were just doing it on our own. And it becomes almost like an unstoppable force. It's a very unique organism that's created there, that means that there's so much stronger and so much more powerful and can actually create enormous amounts of things when they come together.
How would the world be if Shakti was awakened in this way in the majority of women in the world?
Well, it would be a very happy world. We'd see a world with women walking around with big smiles on their faces, and men also walking around with big smiles on their faces. We'd be a very dynamic world, and I do believe a world in harmony, as opposed to this current situation where the world seems to be falling to pieces a little bit. It would be a world where everything is deeply spiritual and sacred.
Anything to add, Mojdeh?
Yeah, I think it would be a very colorful world, and like Magdalena said, very, very happy world. And somehow more in tune with the human needs in a way. And I think this kind of the maternal aspect of femininity and the compassionate aspect would ensure that there's a more humane approach towards the entire planet, rather than sort of like detaching from that fundamental need of the planet.
How would your life be if you hadn't taken this path?
I can only go back to how it was before I really took on this mission of awakening Shakti, and as I said earlier, it just felt quite empty inside of me, and I couldn't really figure out why. So it was quite grey, and I think I would have just followed the very conventional route and just accepted it as that's how it is, and just kind of made do with it, but always had this intuitive knowing that there must be more to life than this, and this kind of longing to discover what this more might be, and yet might not have quite enough courage to actually pursue it.
I don't know, maybe I'd be a farmer. I'm not sure. I don't know how to answer that completely, because it's been such a part of the journey for such a long time, and I don't know, I feel like
it's just not relevant to you.
Yeah, I'm doing the most important things that I feel my soul needs, and yeah, this is the way I choose to live my life.
The one aspect we haven't talked about yet is our relationships, and they are quite an important aspect of our lives. When you awaken your femininity, how does that change your relationships?
I think when you awaken your femininity, you also awaken your own self-knowledge and what needs that a relationship has and how they should be fulfilled. But also, when you awaken your femininity, you also start to become aware of the polarization aspect and what attracts you and what your soul calls for. And this is bringing us greater understandings of what relationships come into our lives and what we seek for. Yeah, and in this respect, having more profound, long-lasting and meaningful relationships also becomes an aspiration of the soul, but in this context of having more spiritual relationships, and not ones where you feel like you lose something in yourself, but actually that both you and your partner gain very many things from the relationship spiritually.
So, for example, if you're having a conflict with your beloved, does that mean that you're more likely to back down? Or what about conflict resolution in that respect?
I think we discover all sorts of ways to ameliorate any tensions within relationships, because also relationships are based on empathy and love, and we can stand up for what we believe to be true, but we also stand up for love, and we act in the name of love. So I think the more that we awaken our femininity, the more actually we awaken this state of being active in love and letting love be the driving force that guides us. So however love wishes to manifest, may it be through embracing in that moment, or sitting down and just admiring each other, or even just to take a pause and to have some space to reflect upon things. These things become more apparent as we awaken. Both our femininity, and also for the man, when he's awakening his masculinity, he becomes much more conscious of what needs to happen within the relationship.
So this active state, I think the awakening of the femininity in a relationship just brings more dynamism and more active engagement of the relationship, and this aspiration of making it a spiritual relationship and as part of our mutual growth also means that it becomes a kind of like a playground of discovering ways of actually going through that growth together. And so it leaves very little space for this sort of like stagnant stagnation between the couples. Especially if you both have this aspiration for transformation, then it's continuously transforming both of you. So therefore the whole relationship is continuously transforming. And ideally it's feeling like a new relationship all the time, because everybody is constantly changing.
And presumably you're talking here about emotional maturation as well.
Yeah, as you deepen the relationship, then you also mature more in yourself, but also mature more in the relationship, and emotionally be able to relate to that person. And through this game of intimacy also become more available to be vulnerable, to be seen, and to relate to the other person from a higher perspective. And this allows this kind of like superior ways of communicating and superior ways of actually engaging with deep wounds and deep traumas that have been sitting there your entire life, and healing them as a process of that relationship.
As you said before, the Shakti power is an incredible force. Are women frightened of this force, or are they frightened of historically the reaction against the force?
I'd say a bit of both. Like I said, for me, I was frightened of the attention it was drawing, and also a little bit frightened of how far it goes if I start to become sensual, for example, or these types of questions. But yeah, once you start to tap into that energy and actually realize its enormous potentiality, then there is a lot of consciousness needed to actually be able to manage it and to be able to navigate it in the right orientation. And I think that's why it's so important to integrate this. For me, anyway, it has been to integrate this path of awakening Shakti with discipline and regular yoga practice and meditation, which helps me to actually align all that energy in the right direction.
Would you be willing to share some of your life experiences, Mojdeh?
I mean, one period of my life where I was working very intensely in a big architecture firm, and I was mainly working with men, and it was really difficult in that period to be kind of trying to keep up with them and trying to be equal to them. And I started to actually work more with my femininity in that period, and started to get quite playful and experimental with the way I manifested as a woman, as a way of harmonizing my integration within that environment. Because I'd also, based on everybody else's conventional assumption, tried to be more like them. And I noticed it really wasn't effective. I wasn't really being heard. I wasn't really being seen. I wasn't really being effective in the task I was trying to do there. And as soon as I started to actually be more feminine in my approach towards them, and I don't mean flirty or, ridiculous or anything like this, but just to be more myself, just to kind of dress how I would like to be dressed, even if it is not like a suit, a black and white suit, or to speak to them as I would speak to a man, and as speak to them in a more feminine tone, and to just be there in that company as a woman, like consciously as a woman. And I noticed that this actually helped a lot to not just harmonize my relationship with them, but to harmonize their relationships with one another. It really helped to kind of calm down the environment a lot, and to just to bring this soft touch where it was really needed, because everything was very, very tough and very rigid. And this feminine fluidity just helped to kind of soften things down, soften the tones down, soften the overall approach down, and even help them to see things more creatively rather than just seeing things so rationally. So I felt in that moment how by being a woman, truly taking on the role of being a woman in this very male-dominated area, actually brought heart into the environment. It helped the guys to connect more with themselves. It helped them to connect with me more from where I truly am. And it helped us to really work a lot more effectively together.
That's a very brave and bold move. Did you worry beforehand that you might be losing something, that you might lose some respect? Or
yeah, it was a difficult transition, and I have to give credit to another woman who was in the office who was doing it very actively. She wasn't saying she was doing it, but she was very boldly dressed and very in a very feminine way, and she was very touchy-feely and very sweet and delicate but she could do that because she was an office manager in a way, and the female architects were not really doing that because we felt like we were more in competition with the men and we had to keep up a certain level. But she inspired me, and she gave me the confidence that it can be done, and that it won't be judged if I actually kind of be more confident in manifesting as a woman, because she was so confident in her femininity. And this is one thing that I really love about this process of admiring other women, is that their qualities really become contagious. And if you sit beside a woman who is confident in her femininity and in herself, then it becomes very natural to actually feel more confident in yourself. So somehow I even started to feel by observing what she offered me, I observed that it's also a part of my role in this office to set an example of being a woman in this environment, in this very difficult environment. And it did catch on. I noticed it caught on very much, and I even had conversations with other women in the office about how we were all growing more as women by being just more connected with our femininity and not being worried about actively expressing it. And it came in very beautiful ways, like offering each other flowers, putting little chocolates in here and there, and like just being more active in empathizing and caring for one another brought a very special energy in the office.
So you were able to change the culture into one where you could blossom.
Yeah, and it did become like this organism, like I mentioned before, of how when a group of women come together, it creates a deep network of hearts, because it's there anyway. And by becoming conscious of it, it just starts to shine through. And by shining through, it starts to completely transform the whole environment. And I think it's a big part of a planetary movement to actually do this. By allowing this network of hearts between women to shine through, will have a huge impact on actually transforming the whole planet.
Did you have any experiences of having to manage conflict in that environment?
Yes, and I noticed that the men, when I started to be more feminine, the men were more careful, because I was working with very big butch builders, and they were more delicate with me. So they stopped using so much foul language, for example, and they stopped being so pushy for information, and they really kind of became more respectful, if you like. And they took on that role because it polarized them also. For me to be more feminine, it helped them to be more masculine. And they took on that role and that responsibility that there's a woman in the room. Please be careful what you say, not to disrespect her. And before that, I really struggled with conflict, actually, because I was really affected by the abusive language, both between them and towards me. It was very offensive, particularly maybe the culture I'm from. We just don't really speak to each other like that. And that was one of the main ways of kind of managing conflict. But in myself, I still have kind of triggers that I've noticed, particularly in the family environment, where I had a recent one, for example, with my brother, whom I love very dearly and I've been very close to my entire life. But we're going through a phase in our lives where we are disagreeing very strongly about religion and spirituality. And we had this very heated discussion over Sunday lunch last week, where we were almost at each other's throats, and I wanted to just throw in my teenage childhood tantrum and walk off and just slam the door behind me. And somehow, because I've been practicing a lot more this state of being centered in my heart, I had this reminder, thank God, to just stay centered in my heart. And I just took a moment of silence and stopped shouting and just took it in and stayed there with him. And I heard this inner voice inside of me that you don't want to fall out with your brother over this. And then I just kind of backed down and put the sword down and relaxed. And just my reaction to this helped him to also just calm down. And he also realized he doesn't want to fall out with me over this. And it opened up a whole nother paradigm in our relationship in a way that almost instantly we started to connect from where we could inspire each other rather than from where we were disagreeing with one another. And we started to even exchange ideas of things that he could teach me and things that I could teach him. So the whole dynamics completely changed between us, and it created this wonderful space for us to just appreciate with one another and empathize with one another rather than focusing on the things that are clashing between us. And it was a very, very beautiful experience for me, and it really, I'm very grateful for it, because I feel like that conversation could have gone either way very easily. And just by having had banked this practice of centering in the heart really helped me to let go of my egotistical trigger and to just set a higher intention of loving him and to see the best in him and to actually lift all those veils and see the purity of his heart through it all.
I also have worked in environments where there's been a male predominance, shall we say. I mean, I'm a doctor, so there are, often working in environments where there are more males there. However, I always have felt that the best way to get a point across is actually just being in my own nature and being relaxed and feminine at the same time, and speaking about these things actually and this follows through in all environments actually, that when you're feeling good in yourself, naturally you flow in your most feminine ways. Actually, it's a very good barometer. If you don't feel feminine in a certain moment, ask yourself why you don't feel feminine. It's probably something that you need to harmonize and balance. I mean, perhaps you're just exhausted, or you're very stressed, or whatever. It shows you that you need to sort that situation out so you can be in the best version of yourselves. Actually, what I've discovered in all sorts of environments was that this admiration that comes. And I had very many colleagues saying to me that it was a grace that I arrived in the team, for example, or that it was that from me being there, they decided to do meditation. And I wasn't talking about it a lot at the time. They just simply felt, And also recently I was just in an environment where somehow femininity isn't placed a huge importance. And one of my friends there, who's very much a heroine archetype, she was like saying to me, I love being around you because you're so soft and warm and feminine. And I really appreciated that in that moment, because actually I didn't feel that was something that she would notice, but yet she did. And just made me very much aware of this gift that we have. So I would say that, understanding our feminine nature and living it is an important way to navigate through life. And it shouldn't be undermined by an attitude of, you need to stand up for yourself and be assertive and all of that stuff, because actually the real self-confidence is just about knowing who you are and being who you are in an authentic way, in a profound way. And it's not about having to put up a shield or a wall or have your spears out to get through life, because all you're going to come across in those kind of circumstances, even more challenges and even more fights and pressure. And actually, more importantly, is to be able to rest in your own true nature, and to be in the state of balance there that allows you to just be in your most and bestest way possible. Yeah.
So Magdalena, could you give an example of how you might appreciate another woman? Perhaps with Mojdeh.
Yeah, with pleasure. So actually, Mojdeh is someone I have had a lot of admiration for the time that I've known her, which is many years. She is she's a woman with an immense creativity and aspiration that brings her very much in this direction, but always I notice showering new ideas and new inspiration there. And also very nice that she has this very practical aspect about herself, which is also I don't know, for me, who's sort of very poetic and kind of having this version of life there, also to have someone who's also very practical in how they do things, it's kind of a blessing to have around. But also her appreciation of beauty, which is something I also feel very much in my heart. I have a lot of respect for this this appreciation. Also, how much she loves other women, which I think is such a, and how much she loves other women and how much she aspires for their awakening. This is very inspirational for me, and very beautiful.
Thank you, Magdalena. I think Magdalena was probably my first Tantra for women teacher, actually, or first Shakti teacher. And right from the beginning, I really admired her beauty. Like, she has this very startling beauty for me, like this luscious hair and beautiful eyes and perfect, beautiful body. And this was already like a huge point of inspiration for me, just seeing how she is in her femininity and how she's very like setting an example of the right way of being shamelessly a woman in a way. And this was very inspiring for me. And then just all the wisdom that comes out very, very naturally because she's been applying it is also very inspiring. And then just getting to know her over the years more and more as a friend, I've really appreciated her true authenticity in the way that she's continuously like shining light on her own, on herself, any shortcomings she feels, and she's very open about actually verbalizing it. And this makes me feel instantly at ease with her because I feel like, okay, she knows what's going on, then she's not sort of like pretending to be anything other than she is. And also this complete devotion towards spirituality, towards God, and towards helping others is really humbling for me when I see just how many classes she's running, and she's constantly, all these years, she's been so on. And I was even thinking about you recently, thinking how there's just such a continuity to her. She has exactly this like gentle flow of a river. She just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going, and it's just spreading her wisdom and her knowledge and her beauty. And I've known her for, I think, more than 15 years now, and it's amazing. She's actually like a testimony of how well yoga works in preventing the aging process, even because she hasn't really aged all this time. And despite of all the things that she does, like I think the normal person, if they were doing a proper job as a doctor and then teaching all the time in the evenings and all the sort of like daily practice that she does, then it would be kind of wearing you down. But she's actually thriving through that, and the way she sets that example of actually growing through practicing is very inspiring.
You're both very inspiring. So before we end, is there anything you'd like to say? Anything in summary that you would like to add? Anything I've forgotten to ask you?
I believe that being a woman is the greatest gift that we're given in this lifetime, and in order to repay this greatest gift, we should consciously assume this.
I would say that being the perfect ideal woman that you can be only brings happiness and only brings color and life to yourself and your environment and all those around you, to just not be frightened of it at all, and to really allow it to unfold and manifest in a natural and beautiful way.
Magdalena and Mojdeh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.